All right, all right, all right, all right. Hang on. Whoa,
Whoa, man, that
whoa,
wakes me up.
whoa,
I
Johnny.
think that's waking up our 32 million guests too.
God, I think it's waking up everybody. It's certainly waking me up, Johnny. So nice to be back here in the old Rumble Room again with
Oh,
you.
it sure is
And
because there's so much rumbling going on out there. Oh my
there's a
God,
lot
what's
of rumbling and tumbling and
oh
bumbling and all those things. But it's always great, John, to be able to chat about all the issues and discuss what's working and what's not working in our fair land. And
exactly?
I heard a report. I have a spy report
Oh
from the
no.
legislature where I'm hearing the BC Conservatives have basically broken into all these different factions. There's two major groups. There's the people that are the old Conservatives that joined with Rustad, and they were members of the BC Conservatives from long ago, and they've never been BC Liberals. They've always been BC Conservatives,
Yes.
and they now are in a flame out with people that are newbies who joined the party, or some of the remnants of the BC Liberals that came on with him. And it all came to kind of a head when Elaine Sturco was handed her walking papers. But I understand it's really bad there behind closed doors. And let's face it, David Eby is not exactly ingratiating himself in the province, but he's got a fairly wide open door to continue doing what he's doing because there's no pressure from the Conservatives. They're a mess.
He could do whatever he wants. I was on a call the other day with with what was a long time uh, BC Liberal slash social credit. Boy, that really takes me back a long way. But a stalwart from the right, a political organizer. And I go, "What you up to these days?" And he goes, "Well, I'm helping the Center Party or the something like that." And I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah. What is that?" He go, "Well, there was another group that splintered off the Conservative Party before this latest splinter. By the time this is over, or let's say within 6 months, there'll be five or six right-wing parties. EB can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants."
And the thing that's going on right now, it's so interesting to see what's been happening in terms of this debate about the pipeline going to Prince Rupert. We've had a situation now where we've had all sorts of panel discussions on the national newscast saying, "Oh, it's terrible. David Eby's against the pipeline. The First Nations are against the pipeline. It'll never happen." And you think, well, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if that's true or not. But I just saw a panelist from BC on a panel with Rosie Barton yesterday saying that, in fact, they don't even need the BC government to be signing on. And most First Nations are in favor of the pipeline. They're just not choosing to put those First Nations on CBC. And if the federal government say, yeah, that's the way it's going to be. So that's interesting as well. I think that David Eby's
It's
making a lot of
hugely
noise,
interesting, Robin.
trying to sound tough. He's trying to sound tough.
Well, he's not coming off as sounding tough. He's coming off as sounding mad and impatient and sort of like a little child that's not getting his way.
Yeah.
Like, just settle down. Clearly you're representing your NDP interests, but are those truly the province's best interests? Are they the country's best interests at this time? Can we just settle down and act like business people here?
Well, if we had a business person who was in charge of the BC government, maybe that would be the
Maybe
case.
that's what would
But
happen.
I just, before we got to guess, we're going to talk a lot more about oil and gas coming up
Are
here in
we
a couple of
ever?
minutes because Dan McTeague is going to join us. And I think it's great that he's going to be with us talking
Hmm.
about oil and gas and all of that from his perspective. But before we get to that, I guess Donald Trump must be lined up with his hands open for that Nobel Prize. It seems that we're going to finally have at least a form of peace in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel, and they're going to turn those last surviving hostages back to the Israelis. I don't know what to make of it, though. I mean, it seems to me we've had war in the Middle East, in that region, since the 1940s, and it might be a little premature to say it's peace in our time. But they did it in Northern Ireland. We never thought that was ever going to get settled. What do you think about this?
Well, there was recently an anniversary of that terrible tragedy, and a lot of video, and pictures of the graveyards and what happened. And this is a tragedy beyond tragedy. I mean, that event is something almost humanely I can't even comprehend that I would be involved with or be as a consequence and a family member. So to get even a chance that 10% of these remaining hostages would come home is extraordinary news. That's great news. Oh my God. For the in some instances, what people call genocide happening over there, for that even to stop in some kind of remote way would be great. That's what I think about it as a human being, as a rational person. Do I trust Donald Trump for 1 minute? No. He's saying all this stuff. Who gives a shit?
Well, I
Until
really
we
don't
see
trust
the
Netanyahu. That's the guy I worry about more than I worry about. I mean, I don't trust Donald at all, but I mean, Netanyahu, I mean, to rein him in is going to be a major,
right?
major endeavor.
What are they being promised? So if this happens, my heart will be full and humanity will be better off. Will it happen? Man, oh man, Robin, who knows?
Well, I don't know, but we'll be watching that with great interest. We talked to Chris Kilford from the Canadian International Council, and he had lots to say about the Middle East. And he was an envoy. He actually worked in Turkey for a number of years as a military envoy with the administration. Beg your pardon, I guess the ambassadorship in
Yes,
Turkey. Knows a
yes.
lot about that region, and I didn't see him doing cartwheels about peace in our time, but
No.
we'll see. I
And
mean,
and
I don't
to
want to.
to
I don't. You wonder what all these guys, these protesters, have been marching around with Palestinian flags and wearing all
what are
the
they going to do?
what are they going to do with their free time? I guess they'll be back in the war in the woods or something. It's just what are
Exactly.
they going to do? What are they going to do if they actually
I
have peace? Are they going to keep marching and or find something else to march for? They're obviously pretty enthusiastic. So you wonder if they'll keep that going, or is it the end of mass prayer sessions on the streets of our cities? Don't do it in Victoria. I haven't seen it very much in British Columbia, but back
we've
east
had
in
some speakers,
Montreal,
Robin, you and I, where on the Rumble Room that have told us a little bit about the back end of some of these protesters and how some of them it's a business. They just shuffle around protest to protest. It doesn't matter what flag they're carrying. So to your point, I think that core group of people just find another issue, and
yes.
it looks like Eby's going to give it to them, and perhaps it'll be the tanker ban not being reversed. They'll be protesting
Well,
that.
what's the tanker
Same
ban? I mean,
people.
the Americans are sending tankers up and down our coast all the time. I mean,
I know, that's
it's
right.
it's not really a legitimate issue. And all this concern, everybody always points to the Exxon Valdez. Well, there's a lot of people around now, Johnny, a younger generation don't even remember the Exxon Valdez in
Yes.
Alaska. That happened, what, 30 years ago. So there's a lot of people out
There's
there
been
now
a
that
few
they
changes
hear
since
about it
then.
like almost a mythological thing. It's like 3 Mile Island or something. Well, we had 3 Mile Island. We still have nuclear plants all over North America, and there's going to be a lot more because we've improved the technology. We don't have single hull tankers carrying oil and gas anymore on the West Coast. They're all double hulled. And there's all these different protocols they go through. So that the chances of a massive spill off the West Coast comes down to close to zero. Close to
Exactly.
zero. So, I mean,
It,
you got to
there's
think that that's out the window as well. So,
there's been some technology changes in our phones and our computers and our world, as well as our equipment that negotiates trade around the world. These big, huge tankers. No, but I mean, what do you think? Do these companies want spills and an endless amount of suing and court? No, they don't. They want to conduct business. They've made it safer. Anyway, I'm no tanker expert, but I'm logical
you can
man.
see we're really caught up on the whole oil and gas thing, and that's great because that's what our main guest Al McTeague is going to talk about. I just wanted to fit in one more small note that we were so impressed with John Wilson and the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce for actually getting serious about standing up for business downtown, doing something about the street situation, cleaning up the streets, cleaning up Pandora, getting the tents off of there, the chop shops, everything else. And yet, at a recent luncheon that we both attended, not to name names, we won't name the counselor, but the guy was saying, He thought that the chamber president was coming off a little bit too strong. He thought the CEO should have been, a little bit more measured in his comments. Well, I think being measured in your comments on this issue is that ship has sailed. It's
That
time for
ship
us to get.
sailed.
We've had we've had a couple of CEOs at the Greater Victoria Chamber who have not been particularly interested in getting involved, rolling up their sleeves and getting into this issue. They've wanted to keep at arm's length from it and basically stay on side with government and government policies on all the different things that government are doing. Some of those things are welcome. Some of them simply don't work. And somebody needs to blow the whistle. And I think that's part of the BC Chamber's job. So,
A
thumbs
large
up again.
part
I
of,
keep giving
yes.
thumbs up to John Wilson. I'm going to do it again on this show because I just think, he was right to do it. Anybody starts phoning him up and saying, I think you're too heavy-handed, they should take a look in the mirror. What have they been doing all these years? Maybe it's time somebody else stood up and said what's going on our streets is no longer acceptable.
The chambers of commerce from 150 years ago were started to support and represent business interests. And if you have a business in downtown Victoria and you can't open the door because there are folks lying there who are homeless and have used your opening door facility as a facility through the night, that's a problem. You can't conduct business. This isn't complicated. Business people cannot solve this problem, but we want to run our businesses without obstruction and with safety. That's a simple message. We're not infringing on anyone else's human rights. John Wilson, way to go. Represent business and allow us to conduct business.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the more we talk about it, hopefully the more people spring into action. And we need that younger generation to get involved. I mean, the younger generation in our community, I know, are very frustrated. And they're moving to all sorts of alternative forms of political movements and all sorts of things because they just don't feel they're being heard. Well, they need to be heard on this. Because I don't think our generation is doing a lot of glorious things in terms of dealing with this. I think our parents' generation would. And then we'd say, oh, that's far too hard. That's far too unbending. Our parents' generation never would have put up with some of the things that have happened over this last 30 years. There's no way we'd have Pandora if that generation was still around, if the Peter Pollins were still here and, and the Frank Carson seniors and all those people. This just wouldn't be happening. But, we've become more permissive. We want to help people. We see them all as victims. We see it all as a disease, and nobody wants to get heavy-handed. And so we're basically fighting an uphill battle. And I think the younger generation are starting to recognize that they're being done no favors. Our generation has let a lot of things slide, and we've also allowed the price of homes and the cost of living to go right through the ceiling, and the younger generation having trouble building homes, building lives, building families. And they look at us and they think, you fat cats have left us in a mess. So I'll be heartened when I see the younger leaders, the leaders of tomorrow, or even the leaders of today who happen to be younger, stepping forward and saying, enough. It's time to change these things. It's time to take into account what's really happening and what has to happen to clean this stuff up. So, we're two old guys, John. We're not that old, but we're getting up there, sort of giving our take on things from our experience in life. But I'll be so heartened to see the younger leaders stepping up and really doing something about this because it's gone on far too long. And, we can't have this going on for successive generations. At some point, it has to end.
The key piece to this, which you and I have been advocating for now almost 4 years, is that it's okay to present your point of view. We support any point of view, especially on the show. But if that point of view has consequences, then also have a solution to your point of view. And there are no solutions to what's going on right now. There are lots of points of view that these people must have these rights, and they have a right to do this, and they must have this. But what are the solutions when those things are causing consequences for the rest of our community to break down? These are mental issues and health issues, so solve them.
And now, Joining us all the way from sunny Ontario, and it's been really sunny and warm in Ontario, so I don't just mean to say that. And people are very sunny and happy right now because the Blue Jays are playing well, and everything gets
Yes.
sunnier and happier in Ontario when that happens. But Dan McTeague from Canadians for Affordable Energy, welcome back to the Rumble Room.
Robin, great, and John, great to be here. Thank you for having me. And yes, we're all celebrating. Everyone's wearing blue today, including me.
Yeah, well,
That is
it's
great.
it's the
So
only time
exciting.
I think the Canadians all coast to coast really celebrate anything to do with Toronto. But people do get on board when the Jays play well, so
That's right.
it's nice to see. Um, there's so much to talk about. I've got to go with the thing that's at the top of the list right now, and that's this meeting that Donald Trump has just had with our beloved Prime Minister, Mr. Carney, and Keystone has come up. And Keystone was something that was up before, and then it got canceled, and now they're talking about it again. What does it mean? If Keystone goes through, how does this really benefit Canada? How does Canada forward as an energy superpower, which of course is the way that Mr. Carney got elected?
I hate to say it, Robin, it's our trump card.
Well done,
Uh,
Dan.
it really is. And I got to tell you guys, I mean, from my old job, Tomorrow's Gas President, gas buddy, and things like that, time and time again, I would have my American friends remind me that without Canadian oil, the U.S. Transportation Department, Defense, military, agriculture, mining, that entire sector would come to a standstill. Why? Venezuela no longer exports to the United States. It's a basket case. Saudi Arabia is not interested. There's no Russian oil. No one, and Mexico, the heavy oil they have is lousy. What do you need heavy oil for? Diesel. Everyone talks gasoline, but I can tell you the most important transportation fuel we have in the world, bar none, is diesel, and it's the global workhorse. So Canada having heavy oil, United States having reconfigured, and I'm telling you, in the U.S. Midwest, the soft belly of the Trump administration and its MAGA support in the U.S. heartland, all those refineries configured to taking heavy oil, most of it from Canada, which is why we went from 1 million to almost 4 million barrels in the past 20 years of exports, and we could easily double that. That happens economically, a real boost in the arm, 0.5% in GDP increase, probably 30 to 40 billion dollars in economic activity, something we desperately need at this time.
Dan, I'm confused. Okay, and if I'm confused, that means a whole bunch of other really other Canadians are confused that look like
Oh,
me.
look at me.
I thought that the Keystone pipeline was closed because the Americans closed it. We're
Yeah.
ready to go. So what are we offering? I mean,
So
we're ready to turn on the tap, aren't we?
we've got the pipeline built right from Hardisty right to the U.S. border.
Yeah.
Inches from the U.S. border, the pipeline's ready to go in action. The United States had it mostly built. Then at the last second, the Biden administration, the Bidenites came in and first signature of the new Biden government in 2020 was to kill, or 2021 was to kill the Keystone XL. So they started selling off parts and pieces. It's no secret that the Trump administration wants that thing rebuilt and quickly. I had a quick conversation
But
with
we're
one of
built.
the.
Dan, we're
Yeah,
built. So,
it was almost built. Yeah, yeah. We would have this up and running by now.
well, then what it's up to them.
It is, and it's up to them to. I think that's probably, if anything came out of that, it's a discussion that Mark Carney is finally realizing, given that his company Brookfield bought the largest pipeline company in the United States, the Colonial Pipeline. You know, gas prices shoot up in British Columbia and Canada, and they come down during the summer after hurricane because the Colonial Pipeline's down. That's no small aortic artery, if you will, for the U.S. fuel industry, and so pipelines are a big deal, not just because of the issues around the politics surrounding them. It's because economically for Canada and the United States, it's the single most important connection we could have. It's 15% of your GDP. Unlike my industry, where I came from, Toyota, as you know, public relations for that company. We had to go down the Fraser Wharves and watch our cars being taken off back 30 years ago before I was a member of Parliament. The automotive sector is important, but it pales in comparison to oil and gas exports, especially to the United States. And this thing could be ready in a very short period of time. But I think that's the announcement, and I think that's the cat has been let out of the bag. However, where our politics line up on this, it's damn good for Canada, and it's damn necessary for the United States.
So tell me what this does for other oil and gas projects. What does this do for the proposal for a pipeline that goes to Hudson's Bay that they've been talking about, that the Manitoba government's so keen on? What does this do of course, bells ringing to the proposal for British Columbia, where it would go to Prince Rupert, and we could, conceivably have very large markets ready for our oil and major products like that in the future, heading out to China, Korea, all of Southeast Asia, really. I mean, David Eby has made a lot of noises that this can't happen. It's not going to happen on his watch. First Nations won't go for it, but there are First Nations leaders that would. And Rob Shaw from Czech TV was on. He was on a panel show on CBC with Rosie Barton. And the panel, of course, was doing the usual CBC move where they're saying that this pipeline, is ill-fated because BC won't go for it and because the First Nations are against it. And Rob Shaw was on this panel. He said, as a matter of fact, they don't need BC's buy-in. They can put through this pipeline without BC say so, as long as Mr. Carney's willing to take a risk that he may lose a few seats on the West Coast, and maybe with a small majority he'd feel that way. But he said that they can go ahead, and there are a lot of First Nations that are in favor of it. And CBC even admit once in a while, glibly, that they don't bring on some of the First Nations leaders that in fact are in favor of energy. So if the Keystone happens, does that make any difference for these other projects?
No, but it does suggest that as Canadians can see the Keystone built a lot quicker. It's almost done it's certainly done on the Canadian side. And it wouldn't take much to get back the rights of way. It was a presidential order that killed it. It'll be a presidential order that resurrects it. And I would expect that could happen in the next couple of weeks. That would be a big announcement from the White House, and I think that'll overshadow everything, just because of the amount of energy that we could produce and we could sell, and that we could scale up very quickly. I mean, our ability to produce 4.5 million barrels a day is scalable to 8 to 9 million a day. And short of the climate issue, which I think has confused a lot of people over the past 10 years, the reality is that we've done ourselves no good by saying, no, we can't do this. And I do agree with Rob Shaw. I may disagree on a lot of things. We've traded barbs and crossed swords on occasion, but this is completely federal jurisdiction. The province has very little to play with it. And I think John Horgan realized it, the late John Horgan. I know many times I also had words with him, he as well, and back towards me. But you can use all the tools you want in the toolbox. At the end of the day, the national interest comes first and foremost. The big problem is not so much whether Trump does this. I think it's inevitable. It's that Mark Carney's got to do a 180-degree turn for where he's been for the past 10, 15 years. And I think the reality of 2025 is so crushing, Robin and John, that the country has to accept this. And if they don't accept this, then how are you going to pay for our social programs? How are you going to manage the $100 billion+ deficit? Look, I was a member of Parliament in 1997 and sat there with Paul Martin when we basically almost laid an egg economically. We were so scared because the IMF was going to take us over because our deficit, our spending had gone out of control. So I think we're back to a point where let's do something on the expenditure side, but let's prove that we can have some growth in an area that has the potential overnight to make a big difference. And I would see, among other things, I just checked it a few minutes ago, the Canadian dollar's now dropped back to 140 pennies to buy $1 US. Do you know that costs you 25 cents a liter for gasoline? Every other commodity we have is priced in US dollars. Yeah. So it means that our purchase power has been badly weakened by all this. Build that pipeline, the Canadian dollar comes back to 120. We don't get the discount, or build both pipelines, and the next 20 years is going to look very, very bright.
Dan, one of the great things of having you on is that you kind of have some inside information. You're talking to people on the inside. You're in here. You're in there. Okay, so here's my question to you. Now that we've elected a conservative prime minister, oh, sorry.
Oh, that never happened.
Conservative policy-based prime minister. The rubber's going to hit the road, okay? He was voted in to get this stuff done. What are you hearing? Does he have the guts? To Robin's point, to your point, is he going to push the green light or not?
I think he's putting the brakes on green net zero altogether. He has no choice. Reality is.
I meant the traffic.
Well, that's fine.
Not the Green Party.
Well, he has to be careful about conditions. He hasn't removed the tanker ban, even though Americans run their product from Prudhoe Bay all the way down to Valdez and then across a couple hundred miles there from the coast there. So. Look, I think for a lot of people, it's going to have to be a matter of putting a bit of water with your wine, because to use a Trudeau a
What?
Trudeau
You're bringing
exclamation
him
that he
up?
made many years
No.
ago. It's not 2015. It's 2025, and things are really, really, pressing. And I would say that on November the 4th, you and I are going to wake up on November 5th wondering what bond rating agency is going to downgrade our credit, which one is going to send the country into an economic tailspin as a result of not having enough to make our ends meet. And I don't care what kind of creative financing Mark Carney and his gang want to get involved with. At the end of the day, I think the PBO has made it very clear, debt is debt. And since the days of Enron, I don't think we're really appreciative of creative financing. So I think for Mark Carney, there's only one way ahead. Dump those things, at least temporarily. EV mandates, emissions caps, the tanker ban, and anything that would stop pipelines. Because the Liberals have had to wear this for 10 years. It's time for them to shed it, and they can do that. I work for Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. They did. They shed the old Liberal image of spendthrifts who would go around and be largesse to everybody. And we were in the era of austerity. I think we're there now. And if Mark Carney wants to stay there, he's got to do that.
I'm going to give you a prediction. Okay. I voted for Mark Carney because he out-conservatived the conservative guy. Okay? And if they pull back and start to show their liberal roots, this thing will fall apart so fast. I'm not kidding. And they're not a majority government. So you're right. This stuff had better work. We want pipelines. We want energy resources to be facilitated and to generate revenue. We want money. We don't want debt. And we can get out of it. And he promised that, Dan.
Yep. Look, a couple of things with pipelines. The Canadian dollar would quickly move up in value. Second thing is we wouldn't have to sell the Americans our oil for $50 or $30 less what their WTI. We've already seen with a small Trans Mountain pipeline poking a hole into the West Coast, because that's why do we want to do the West Coast versus East Coast? I'll get that in just a moment. By doing that, we've actually increased slightly the value of the strength of the Canadian dollar. We'd be in a real mess if TMX wasn't open. But look, we can't necessarily put a pipeline east. It has to be west because there are no heavy refineries in Europe that I'm familiar with that can process heavy oil. They do in China, they do in Japan, they do certainly in South Korea, and they can do it in Indonesia. There's a number of countries that would take it all along the Pacific Rim. And so I think that's where the future is. And for anybody to say, no, we can't do this, that's great. You've had your term, you've had your time, please step aside. It's time
Exactly.
to do it.
So we could send LNG to Europe. That's what they've been asking for.
Oh my God. Yeah. And think about it. You and I are selling, I'm just looking at the LNG selling for $3.40 an MMBTU. We're selling it to the Americans for $3.40 MMBTU. So we're selling it by cubic foot to the United States for $3-4. They're selling it to Europe liquefied for $15-16. I mean, we're crazy. This is our stuff. We're giving it away to someone else to process it, to send it abroad because we've sort of elbowed up over the past years and said, no, we can sell hydrogen. No one wants they don't want our hydrogen. They don't want our AI. They want our natural gas, they want our mining, and they want our oil, and we got a ton of it.
Yes, and water.
Oh, don't touch that.
Don't touch the water. Don't touch the water. Hey, I want to ask you. I know it's not directly related to what we're talking about, but it's the big bear in the room. We're working towards a renegotiation of free trade with the United States, and we've been muzzling around this. That was what was advertised as Carney's reason for meeting with Trump, and they were all jovial and laughing. And it seems like they were maybe happier because of Keystone than they were about anything else. We also had Howard Lutnick, the dreadful Howard Lutnick, who's the big czar on the economy in Toronto, saying he didn't expect there would be free trade in the future. Period. End of story. So do these things are they related at all? If we do deals that are really promising on energy with these huge numbers, does that make it easier for us to try to renegotiate something that keeps our car industry afloat or keeps other industries afloat or reorgs what's happening with steel and aluminum and of course softwood lumber out in the West Coast?
Well, the interesting thing with commerce secretaries and their president and the administration is that they come and go. They've got 3 years now left in their mandate. They may actually have less than that if Congress flips. But I think I look at this a little differently. Eurasia Group is not known to be a Republican-friendly, Trump-friendly organization. Eurasia Group has been pushing the net zero, has a number, Diana Carney-Fox, Gerald Butts have all been part of the Eurasia Group. Even my old friend who I used to do a lot of interviews with on CTV, and before that, even CBC, who's now a minister, can't think of his name off the top of my head, Evan Sullivan. These people have all become part of this. This was supposed to be a meeting where it was what we call Chatham House rules. So what comes of it, no one's supposed to discuss. And they did. Someone got out and thought they would make a big deal out of this. So I'm not sure what is said can be taken at face value. The intricate relationship between Canada and the United States may be challenged, but it's certainly not over. It has to be improved, and I think it always has to be modified. I'm not one of those who believes that the Americans are ready to throw the baby out the bathwater. And the first topic that we raise is the reason why. The Americans cannot budge without Canadian oil. And like it or not, and natural gas, we are so integrated on the natural gas side. Think of the Montney gas, where that goes a lot to the United States. Without the Montney, without projects in British Columbia, without Saskatchewan, without Alberta, the United States would have a hard time. Yes, they can sell a lot of their gas in the Marcellus Shale, Allegheny Shale. It comes to me here in Ontario. My gas doesn't come from the west anymore. It comes from just south of the border because of shale. The problem for the Americans is that their fracking and their technology from the early 2000s to mid 2000s is starting to peak.
Yes.
They're hitting their nadir. They can't go any higher. They need more. Why? AI. You want to talk automotive? Great. I can talk about that. As I said, I worked Toyota Canada for many years, public relations. AI is the future. And the only way AI works well is if you've got energy. And the only people who've got disposable energy, unless you're willing to burn a lot of coal, which none of us are prepared to do, it's countries like Canada with a lot of natural gas, a lot of energy, and we can that's dispatchable very quickly. So back to automotive. I think that needs to be, it needs to be constantly tweaked every 5 or 6 years. If Lutton is saying he can build all those things, good luck. He hasn't got the infrastructure, he hasn't got the energy, and he hasn't got the jobs to be able to fulfill the needs for the industry. What are you going to do? Pack up 140,000 people and 12 plants here or 11 plants here in Ontario and pack them up and build them overnight in the United States? No, this takes several years, and by then, it's a different administration.
What about steel? What about aluminum?
Yeah, I think on aluminum, what the biggest clarity we have to have is not to mix Chinese steel and aluminum in our products. And aluminum, the Americans don't have it. They may think they have it. It's going to take years for them to catch up with what we've done in Ontario, especially in Quebec, which of course is North America's powerhouse when it comes to aluminum, unless you want to go to South America. But that's a different ball of wax with a lot of political and geopolitical considerations. I think there has to be some pretty intense negotiations. It's based on Canada saying we have the weak hand, we have a very strong hand to play. If I had been a member of parliament and remained where I was for many years, I would have been one of those 10 years ago who would have stopped or at least tried to stop those out there who are trying to prevent our energy from getting to markets, especially the United States, because that truly is our advantage here and our resources are as well, which is why I think it's interesting the U.S. administration just bought one of our big lithium companies here in Ontario, took a 10% stake. They know where the rare earth minerals are, and you can find them around the world, but you can find them 20, 30 minutes north of the border. It's not a hard thing to think about.
I would like to talk with you a little bit about politics because, hey, you were a politician and you provide great insight. It seems to me that Danielle Smith, who was sort of anti-Carney, was sort of anti-liberal until, of course, she realized they're actually a pseudo-conservative government.
Or even maybe even anti-Canada, right? I mean, for a little while.
So she becomes Carney's buddy, and she kind of lights the flame. And she's almost giddy. And now we have Eby just kind of going off the rails like a grade 9 kid in a schoolyard. Shrill, emotional. What the hell? Is this all big plan here?
Well, I'm old enough to remember back when John Horgan took over his government, how he was able to do it with the Greens, those 4 seats that he desperately needed to form government and throw Christy Clark out at the time. And so, the NDP has really, fashioned itself. It's deeply embedded in green policies, and that's all nice and dandy. But, for the rest of the country, and this is a story I'm giving here in Ontario, it's easy for Eby to come out and say, I'm not going to do it anymore, and, do that business that he did, his boss did a few years ago and say, we're going to use every tool in the toolbox and fight a pipeline that had already been approved 100%, all of the due diligence done. They'd begun doing this. And when the federal government said, well, we can't do much, even though they could, they decided to stay on the sidelines. The company, what did it do? It pack up and left and said to other investors, don't trust Canada. And by the way, what did it cost us? $50 billion and counting on something that would have cost us zero. So when I see people lining up at food banks, when I see people, worried about very much worried about our social programs and that we have this massive debt, I sort of say, I don't want to hear from the David Ebys of this world. I want to hear from people who've got some solutions. And whether she's giddy or not, that is Danielle Smith. I think she probably got a heads up on this Keystone XL thing because it would be music to their ears since the pipeline, as I said, is already built. The ability to crank up to that level would be very easily done at a very, very low cost. And this is what scares the rest of the world is that we can do it and we can do it very quickly, and the returns would be immediate. You're going to turn around and say, I can sell another 1,000,000 barrels a day at $70 a barrel, and no one's going to want to bother investing. As long as Mark Carney is prepared to say, yes, I will do this. And on the Alberta side, that Premier Smith is putting a bit of an incentive to Carney, saying, listen, I'm going to take that oil and I'm going to sequester. I am going to CCSU. I'm going to carbon capture and store what we're doing. So there won't be that real concern that you have. Why are you opposing this? And Mark Carney is saying, I can't pay. I can't pay down this deficit or debt. I got to go with her, and she's willing to come out a little ways with it. So I think, unfortunately for Mr. Eby, it's looking really bad. It's also looking a little odd that a province that has its own interests with respects to natural gas, potentially even some oil, is probably trying to make an argument for its own. I don't blame Eby for doing that, but I can tell you, you're not going to be building any new Site C dams in British Columbia anytime soon, which cost 60 billion, wind up being 27 billion bucks. No one's got, will you pardon expression, no one's got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of anymore.
We don't want to come off like we're some sort of a pro-pollution show. And that's one of the things. The Greens are very upset about the idea of bitumen being sent across in these pipelines. They don't even like the natural gas. They like all the homes in the province, certainly in British Columbia, to switch over to electric. I don't know where that power is supposed to come from, but it also, we hear about carbon capture. We hear about other things that are being done in the industries that are generating or producing energy like oil and gas to make it cleaner. Can we have it both ways, in your opinion? In other words, can we have these industries flourish, make great revenue for the country, make us an energy superpower, and not continue to rapidly pollute the planet or make it uninhabitable?
I think both sides have to come a little closer to each other. And I've seen a lot. I don't take money from these guys. I don't know who the hell they are. They don't like my predictions when I tell people that prices are going up 6 or down 6 or 12 or 15. They lose a lot of money with my predictions. My intention here is to understand that what Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien, said to me in 1998 when I produced the report in the Liberal Committee on Gasoline Pricing is, they said, you're not going after the upstream. I said, no, it's downstream. It's dealing with the competition issue. People like Mark Jacquard, who's now running the show for you in BC Energy, was a forerunner in some of that with the BC Inquirer in gasoline. So that was at the time. Look, I think the industry needs to tell more people of the great things that it's doing. And science aside, polemics aside, and tensions aside, and foundations and charities that act like they're doing something good for charity, but in fact are lobby groups and lobby arms for certain green organizations, those should be put aside and make a decision based on reality and practicality. If we have the ability to capture and store, let's do it. We're doing it in Saskatchewan. And if we have the ability to sell oil to the rest of the world that is desperately needed versus a country with a really lousy, environmental track record, then we should. And if we can help ourselves financially to create even greater opportunities, keep jobs at home, keep young people believing that there's a future in this country with the revenues that the government can make, then why wouldn't we do this? I mean, we've listened to the other side for the past 10 years, and they've said, no, no, no to everything. I understand the Indigenous. I understand, say, of the 190 treaty indigenous groups along those pipelines, of the 190, at least 90% of them are on board. I know you're not going to get unanimity, but damn it, we should be working towards consensus. That's how we built this country.
Mm. All right. I'm back onto the political aisle again. All right. Switching over, building a little bit about what Robin said. I've asked this of every guest that we've had. Where has that Green vote gone? Where has the NDP vote gone? Is it just silent? Did it just shift over for the time being? Or is it gone now for a while? Because young people, who we generally think vote that way, they want housing. They want healthcare paid for. They want daycare. They want affordability. That doesn't seem to be in their traditional lanes.
No. I think there's a real chasm based on age and demographic. And the older you are, more senior you are, the more you're voting for the status quo and the Liberals. I think if you're younger, you're voting Conservative. And the NDP and the Greens, I think, have been sort of pushed aside. My party, my old Liberal Party, has been very good at co-opting the policies of other parties. And they're probably going to do it again here, which is why I think I'm more positive than I've ever been, regardless of whether they're in or not, or what they've represented over the past 10 years. I mean, I've had some discussions with you a year and a half ago. I was not confident about the future. I'm a little bit more confident knowing that reality is going to force them to force their hand. But for the time being, if I see, the NDP moving towards a more radical leadership with people like Avi Lewis and company, that's the keep it in the ground gang. There's no room for that. And I know his father, Stephen Lewis, I've worked with on getting retroactive viral AIDS patents to Africa. I worked with his father, Stephen Lewis, who was almost premier of my province. And I started my first campaign in 1974, licking envelopes, stamps, and putting them on envelopes and helping people put up signs when I was 13 years of age. Hang on, I was 12 years of age at the time. When David Lewis was the leader of the NDP and lost because of Trudeau wedging him out, and of course, doing Liberals do, as I said at the beginning, and that's co-opt the policies of other parties and try to create a consensus around pragmatism.
Well, it's nice that we can throw a bouquet at the end of the show to the Greens. In BC, there's a new Green leader, Emily Lowen, who sounds like she really wants to go after the oligarchs. She wants to go after big energy. And again, I think it's very warm-hearted principles. I don't think that this is evil. I think it's somewhat misguided, because how are you going to pay for all this stuff if we don't have energy and we don't have industry? But it's an ongoing debate. Dan, you bring so much to the table. I wish we could have hours and hours of this, and we'll certainly want to get you back in the Rumble Room soon. But thanks for joining us again for this program. You're so enlightening and pretty optimistic, not just the Jays, but other stuff. Things are looking better than they have for a while.
I am now, Robin. Thank you to you and John for this, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And we still, I think, have a lot to be thankful for, and we'll have a lot more in the future if things go well.